I've got a few different types of tree. The palm trees use a different shader. This one took quite a bit of thinking about because um, the stem has to bend proportionately to the height. So the vertices at the top of the stem here need to move with the wind, whilst the base needs to stay still. So that's all right. That's a linear or a it's not linear, but I think it's the square of the height is being used as a multiplier for each vertex against that texture map sampling. But then the vertexes of the fronds have to move much more. We want them to wiggle in the wind much more than the stem. But obviously the vertices of the fronds that are down here are getting close to the 0 point of the base of the game object. So how do we make these vertexes move so far when the stem is only moving a little bit? We can't use that same algorithm based on the height. But if we use a different algorithm, how do we make sure the other end of the frond stays attached and moves precisely the same amount as the stem does at this origin here or at the end of the stem? You have to keep the fronds attached or appearing to be attached here whilst wiggling much more excessively at the base. So that took some thinking about, and the way I've done it is to so the stem shade is straightforward, but the fronds, first of all, they calculate the base movement for this point here in using the same algorithm as for the stem, and then they add on a supplementary movement, and they add on then a turbulence as well. So two add-ons. Turbulence is just sample from the turbulence map, and is nothing particularly interesting about that. But the main additional movement for the frond is then a multiplier of its own object space y direction, which i.e. its sort of length. So obviously the vertex doesn't know, the vertex being shaded does not know any context about where it is. It doesn't know it's on a frond versus on the stem. It doesn't know where the base of the stem is or anything like that. All it knows is its own vertex, x, y, z. And in UV space, or its object space rather, in its object space, it has a coordinate being its position, but that's a relative position to its origin. So in essence we know two things. We know its relative position to an origin, and so rather than make the origin here, I've moved the origin in Blender to be at the position of the frond where it touches the stem, but then move the origin back along the y-axis by the height of the stem. So we can say in object space the frond's length is therefore its y coordinate, its own y coordinate, and but the stem's length is effectively then the z coordinate, and then that gives us the enough for us to get the movement, because we can say base movement will be based on the z coordinate, and then the lateral movement will be based on the object space y value. So it's using object space y and x independently to obtain those kind of two facts, and then the actual world space position, we have that as well, and so the world position of the fronds is where the sampling is being taken from, and that's why each frond is moving with a different, even if two fronds were the same length, they move differently because they're sampling from the map a slightly different point, and also because of the random turbulence that's being generated in the shader. It's essentially the same for this big palmy tree. They're the same principle. We've got a leaf that has an origin at the top of a stem, and we have the same problem to solve. So we've got two types of tree and therefore two types of shader. The first one here is much simpler, much easier. This second kind of palm-based one caused me a lot of head scratching before I could come up with a way of getting it to work.